We cannot continue having billionaires while people go hungry in the richest country in the history of the world, right? That is not okay. And we are at a moment where we collectively can change that. And so this is an opportunity, like you're saying. This is something that has been screwing Americans over for decades. And we have a catalyzing moment where we can rise up together and we can demand the America that we want.
Hi, and welcome back to the Campaign Strategist. Today, I'm talking with Dr. Jiggy Geronimo, a neuroscientist turned campaign strategist who now runs JG Insights, a progressive consulting firm built around an emotions-first, content-first approach to narrative strategy. Jiggy has led state campaigns, coalition work, and messaging research all over the country. She is active in the Trump resistance, sharing information out through her Substack, The Defiance Dispatch, and I'll have a link to that in the description. She's passionate about building collaboration across the progressive movement so we can stop spinning our wheels and start winning bigger together. And speaking of winning bigger, if you like what we do here on The Campaign Strategist, please like, share, and subscribe. And now, let's talk to Jiggy. Jiggy, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, thanks for having me, Pete.
You are welcome. I've been on a lot of calls and briefings with you as speaker, and I've been really impressed with your intellect and your insights, so I'm really, really enjoying this opportunity to get to talk to you directly.
Oh, thanks.
I wanted to start with how you got into this line of work. You started out in neuroscience. Tell me how you got into activism, organizing, campaign work.
So I was kind of always into politics. When I was in high school, I was really into Model UN. I was a total Model UN nerd. And I actually considered going into political science in college, but my family is from India and sort of traditional. And so they said, are you going to be a doctor or a lawyer? And I knew I was not going to be a lawyer. So I went the doctor route and went into more medical science, got really into research, and so got a PhD in neuroscience. But as I was finishing my PhD, Trump 1.0 happened. And so I just sort of dove into grassroots organizing as a hobby. I joined a local indivisible group, started doing California state legislative work. And then when I finished my PhD, just sort of made the move over and worked at Indivisible, ran a voting rights lab, did the 2020 Count Every Vote campaign, and got kind of reacquainted with my love for research and started doing more messaging and political research. And then became the executive director of the research collaborative, where I did lots of polling and surveys and focus groups. And then launched my own consulting where I do narrative work. But I will say, actually, despite my big research background, I have actually made a pretty big shift in the way that I think about narrative in the past couple of years and have actually moved away from polling, even though it will always have a special place in my heart. I actually think that we spend way too much time thinking about messaging through the lens of polling, and that is not how humans really think. We are emotional beings. We really need to be thinking about our narrative. This is why I say emotions first, which is how are our narratives making people feel? Is it making people think and believe the things we need them to think and believe? Because somebody saying that they agree with a statement on a survey, 62% of people saying they agree with a statement on a survey is not how we should be making our messaging decisions. So I bring research into politics, but it's not the only thing we should be paying attention to. I actually think the neuroscience is more important than it is. I think the old way, or what I would like to be the old way, even though people are still operating this way, the old way is you decide you're going to talk about something. Let's say you're a climate organization. I'm talking about the climate, or you're a repro organization. You say, I'm talking about repro. And then you say, I'm going to do a poll to figure out my message. And then you give people in a survey environment 15 messages in a battery, and then you ask people how much they agree with a message. And then we say, okay, this message had the most agreement. 60% of people agreed. And then we write that into a paragraph of message guidance, and we send it off in a tweet, and we say that we've done communications. And then we are confused about why no one's heard our message or why we haven't persuaded anyone. And it's because when you agree with a survey, it doesn't actually tell you whether that message is shareable, whether it's going to go viral, whether it's going to make people do anything whatsoever. So the way that I think about it is, like I said, this more emotions and content-centric strategy, which is we start with how we want our narrative to make people feel and what they want them to think. And we know that emotion is one of the biggest drivers of human emotion. And so we want people to do something. So in this moment, right, we are living under fascism. We need people to organize. We need people to mobilize. We need people to start defying and disrupting the regime. And so we need to make them feel things. We need to make them feel angry. We need to make them feel hope. We need them to feel some solidarity. And so you start there. You're like, okay, I know this is what I need people to feel. And we need them to think certain things. Like we need them to think that we're living under fascism. We need them to feel like this impacts them. We need them to feel like everybody they know is resisting so that there's some social proof. And so that's where you want people to be. And then you figure out what people are actually talking about. What is the conversation right now? What is happening? Maybe it's Halloween. Maybe it's Snap. Maybe it's the Epstein files, right? Given the conversation at any moment, you think about how you can make people feel and think the things you want them to feel and think, and ride the existing conversation and think about the content that people need to see to make them feel and think those things. So for example, you could say, ICE is abducting people. That's a message. You could put that out there in a tweet. Or you could think about it from a content approach and find a video of a mother dropping her kid off at school who's getting taken out of the vehicle by ICE and violently abducted. And now you are showing people, not telling people, creating that narrative through content as opposed to through, like a poll-tested message. And that type of footage, that type of content is much more likely to make someone feel the anger and solidarity than a message. So it's just a different way of thinking about narrative that's really not focused on message. It's much more about narrative, which, is about the words, but it's also about the visuals. It's also about the stories. It's also about the feelings. And I don't think on the left take that holistic approach to narrative. We've always just over-indexed on pollingism, as Anat says.
And it sounded like you were also just characterizing the difference between message and narrative. Is there more to that difference? People often use them interchangeably.
Yeah, now we're like talking about words to talk about words. But yeah, I'd say message is part of narrative, but narrative, like you say, is the whole picture. It's like all of the feelings and thoughts and beliefs and visuals and stories that create a narrative. And so we end up trying to focus exclusively on messaging when we should be thinking more about narrative, and particularly the story piece, right? The story piece is so important because they exemplify the narratives and they make the narratives real for people. And that's why, for example, the right is really good at this. They will find any story of an immigrant anywhere committing any crime, and they will put it on blast, and they will amplify it, and they will repeat it, and anytime, and they'll find many, 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 many stories that they can, and they'll push those out. And so what you're doing there is now you're repeating the same types of stories. And so we know that repetition equals truth in our brains. If you heard about the illusory truth effect. So this is where your brain just perceives repetition to be true. And so we don't do that enough on our side, where we will put a tweet out and then say that our messaging is done, but we have to be really repetitive. But we also have to be authentic, right? In this current information environment, authenticity and attention, volume, virality, those are the things that actually penetrate. And so that's why finding new stories, but somewhat repetitive, is really effective. That's why actually if we look at the social listening data over the past 6 months, ICE assaults and abductions have been trending and going viral for months and months. And that's because there's new stories every day, but we're telling the same narrative over and over and over, but we're finding new opportunities to do that. And so that's why I think part of why that narrative is so effective is because we have real stories. We're able to tell them over and over. And that is really content centric and really emotions first, because it's impossible to watch that footage and not feel something.
Yeah. So that's a great way to visualize it, because ICE has been kidnapping people and coming off very much like an authoritarian, presidentially driven police force. Yes. And we just have constant cycling of new examples of that same theme over and over and over again.
And we're seeing that moves public opinion, right? That's one thing. Like his immigration, people always said, people support his immigration policies, but he's underwater on immigration now because we've been able to showcase those horrors so well.
When we talk about emotions, is it all fear and anger and getting people upset? Because I keep wondering, what are the emotions that mobilize the left? Is it the same emotions? Do we have a different emotional sort of ticker that responds to different things?
Yeah, obviously the right uses fear very effectively. I think when we think about the emotions we want to be invoking, it's important to think about whether the emotions are activating or inactivating, right? So there are emotions there's a whole spectrum of human emotions. There are some of them that make you want to recede, like crawl into bed, eat a tub of ice cream, and hide from the world. Like depression, anxiety, sadness, grief. Those are the types of emotions that make you turn inward and make you retreat. Those are not the things we want to evoke, obviously. But those are a lot of the feelings that people are feeling, right? People are feeling really powerless. They're feeling grief for our country. They're feeling depressed. They're feeling lost. And we need to figure out how to channel different emotions. And a lot of the negative emotions are really inactivating. There is one exemption. Sorry, let me say that again. A lot of the negative emotions are really inactivating, but there's one exception to that rule, and that is anger. Anger is a negative emotion, but is actually very activating. And especially for our side, it can be also very activating. And the nice thing about anger is that it's readily accessible to us because people are fucking pissed off. I don't know about you. It's a bit enraging to watch the president of the United States throw a Gatsby-themed gala on the same night that 42 million Americans are about to lose access to food stamps and might go hungry. 40% of the people are children, right? That is something that is infuriating and should be. So it's not actually hard to, it's not going to be hard to get people mad. We just actually have to do it. And importantly, we have to channel it, right? You don't want to just like make people mad and then feel like they can't do anything about it. You need to give them a villain. You need to give them someone to blame, someone to send their anger towards. The right is incredibly effective at this. They have pinned 100% of your problems on immigrants. They were like, you're mad about your jobs, it's immigrants. You're mad about your healthcare, it's immigrants. If you're mad about literally anything, it's immigrants. And we have not done that effectively on our side in terms of naming who is to blame. And it is the truth, which is the billionaires and greedy corporations are actually to blame for why everything sucks. And we've not named that as effectively. You want to stoke that anger. You want to channel that anger by pointing the finger, pointing the blame. And then you have to also stoke the more positive emotions, right? You have to give them some hope, some sense of agency that they can actually make change, that they can actually do something about it. Because our biggest barrier to overcoming fascism is powerlessness in this country. If people don't feel like there is a way out, they are not going to do anything. They're going to be like, you know what? I'm just going to take care of me and my own. I'm going to try and survive. But if they feel like there is a sense of collective power, fuck these people, we are going to make a better America. That sense of defiance is what we need to be stoking. And we have great examples of this. This is why we need to actually be lifting up the wins, like the Disney example recently. I feel like is a prime example of the regime did a thing. They tried to violate First Amendment rights. First Amendment rights feel very personal to people. It's also a very clear authoritarian move.
Yep.
And then there was a clear action people could take, and it was easy. It was like, go online, unsubscribe from Disney Plus, take a screenshot of that, post it on your social media, create a moment, a viral moment. In a few days, I think it was 3 million people canceled their Disney Plus subscriptions. They lost $5 billion. And what happened, right? We won. And there was a clear corporate target. There was a clear corporate villain that was capitulating, and we held them accountable. And so the more that we can find examples like that, where we can use our economic power particularly to disincentivize capitulation and to really, show the billionaire class who's in charge in this country or who actually has the power, the more we can get people activated and the faster we will get out of this mess.
I thought that the Kimmel experience was really instructive because we can talk about why don't people seem to recognize this, authoritarian behavior? Why aren't they recognizing that this is very fascistic? And it seems like First Amendment, where are the lines, right? Like, what line does he have to cross for people to really rise up? And it seems like violating the First Amendment and depriving people of the ability to hear someone they want to hear seems to be one of those lines. Are there other lines that you think that are as potent in getting people pissed off and motivated? Well, I guess certainly the ICE raids are, because it's been astonishing how many people are risking their bodies, their freedom, using their time to, in one way or another, push back on the ICE roundups.
Yeah, I think ICE is the other, because like I said, it is really emotional. And there is this feeling that it starts with immigrants. And, it's that poem,
Right,
first they came
right.
for, then they came, right? And it's like we're seeing that poem play out in real life. I feel like that the raid in Chicago of that apartment building, primarily Black families, was like a clear, okay, we are moving past immigrants, and then it's journalists, and then it's anyone that dissents, right? We are in that poem. And so I think that's part of why the ICE raids are really radicalizing and moving people. I think one of the special things about the First Amendment piece, the reason that it broke through so much, at least the way I think about it, is I think there's a couple things. People need to feel like this is fascism, and people need to feel like it's personal. And now it's easy sometimes, you're not experiencing the ICE raids in your town, or the National Guard hasn't occupied your city, think that this is happening over there. But once it becomes a First Amendment violation, it becomes like, wait, are they going to come after me for my social media posts? Right? And if they can go after Himmel, like, who am I? Right? That makes it it was that perfect intersection of being really fascisty and being so very personal. I do think that right now, and between now and the end of the year, is another moment of people really starting to feel the impacts of this regime. Obviously, people are going hungry. The food banks, bless them, but it is really hard for them to carry the weight of 42 million people losing access to SNAP. Healthcare premiums are about to explode. And this is the time of year when everyone spends a lot of money, right? You have Thanksgiving, you have the holidays. Everybody knows that their costs at the end of the year are just higher. And with tariffs and the economic pains that we've been talking about this whole year are about to smash into people's lived reality. And I think there is no way for that not to radicalize people, because they should be mad. You're promised that everything was going to get cheaper, and the opposite is happening.
ICE will continue to be a source of those stories because, it's just attracting the kinds of people who seem like they want an excuse to go beat people up, or who are part of the other, like the huge signing bonus, the lack of any real fitness or training standards, the whole thing of not having to identify yourself. You can be masked. It's just,
I would be very curious, the Venn diagram of Proud Boys and ICE.
Yeah. Or I'm really curious how many of Jan 6 rioters who were pardoned are now part of ICE. And if you wanted to create a national fascistic police force, it seems like they're doing everything right to make that happen and to attract the kinds of people who are definitely going to abuse people's rights and hurt them or get them killed. So you've mentioned a couple times the importance of getting people to understand that we're in fascism now. However, and there can be lots of debate about the precise label, but competitive authoritarianism. But this seems to be like an ongoing debate that I see a lot. Do we talk about the authoritarianism, or do we talk about the effects of the policy and, how people's lives are being affected, ruined, torn apart? How should we be thinking about it? Do we talk about the people impacts? How do we connect that to authoritarianism or fascism? And why is that important to name it in this way at this time?
I think it's a both and. I know I see those debates raging. It's like, oh, we should talk about this, or we should talk about this. And it's like, actually, you need to do both. And actually, our friends, Nat Shankar-Osorio and Tara Buss, who I think you've had on this podcast, they've done some research that suggests that you do need to do both. They looked at people who have been activated since the Trump regime has come to power this time. And one of the things that they find for people who have either already taken action or who want to take action is that they do believe that we have broken out of normal and into fascism. And they are also more likely to report that they themselves, their family, or their community have felt some personal impact. And so it's clear that both of those things are things that we need people to, like I said, what do we need people to think? What do we need them to believe? We need them to believe that it's fascism, and we need them to believe that there's a personal impact, because that is more likely to get people activated. And we need a sustained mass civil resistance. We want to defeat fascism in this country. So it's really not an either or. It really is a both and. And particularly when we talk to anti-authoritarianism scholars about how we get out of authoritarianism and how other countries have done it, they are very clear that a mass civil resistance is needed and that we have to start engaging in new types of tactics beyond protests and calling our representatives. We have to actually engage in mass non-cooperation and non-compliance. And so if we need people to start doing that, these are new tools in our toolbox. The American public is not used to mass economic boycotts and strikes and jury nullification and all of these tactics that we are going to need to learn how to use. And because those are tactics that are outside of the normal, people need to realize that we are not living in the normal times in order for them to understand, okay, this is not normal. We have to start doing some new stuff in order to topple this regime.
Because that framework is even with the examples of the terrible things that are going on, people still need a different framework in order to understand, okay, why do we need to go with these new approaches to resistance and protest and showing opposition? That's really interesting.
They're not going to be open to those new tactics. They think we're just living
regular,
a normal democracy where you just vote your representatives and go to city hall. Right? I'm not saying those tactics are not useful. You still have to do those. You just have to add all this new stuff.
I'm really intrigued by, on one hand, we're in absolutely abnormal times on any number of measures, but a lot of elected Democrats can barely tell. Like, they still treat their approach to like congressional negotiation as though it's just, sort of normal. And I also see a lot of NGOs that are, they're aware of it, of course, but just focusing on the policy advocacy, even though that's really, really hard to do these days, at least if you're on the left. It's hard to get anything done that you want through any amount of policy advocacy, and just sort of like, I don't know, blinders, or choosing to just put the whole authoritarian thing in a separate box that hopefully will somehow get worked out. I mean, are you seeing this as well? Are you seeing any shifts in either Democrats and then like the advocacy community embracing the need to just address the authoritarianism head on?
You're right. Both Democrats and a lot of the advocacy community has been operating as if we are still living in the old times. And for a time, so I had a baby in December and I came back from maternity leave in March, and I watched from the sidelines, right, via my Twitter feed and my social media feeds, Doge and like this rapid fascist takeover of our government. And then I came back and was like, oh my God, what are we doing? And it felt like nothing was happening, or it felt like people had not woken up to the reality that we were in fascism yet. And I felt like I was going crazy. But I do think there has been a shift. I think there has been a shift in the last 5-6 months where people are realizing. I think there's also just been more fascist stuff, right? He invaded DC. There's military in our streets. ICE has gotten complete control
of people somewhere out in the Caribbean.
Exactly. So I think as the actions have gotten more egregious, people are waking up to it. That being said, I do think there is a discomfort, both from the advocacy community and the Democratic Party, where, like I said, we're not used to this, right? We haven't faced fascism at this scale in America before. And so we are in uncharted waters. And when you are the Democratic Party establishment and you are used to some time when their bipartisanship was a thing, I don't remember when that was, it feels like it's been a while now, or you're an advocacy group that is, its entire organizational orientation is around congressional advocacy or policy advocacy, it's just a muscle that has not been flexed. And so we have to actually slowly move people, because if you don't just start working out by going to deadlift 300 pounds, right? That's not what you do. You have to slowly build this muscle. And so we have to practice, we have to grow our movement, we have to socialize this idea of non-cooperation, these new tactics, and we have to bring people along with us, particularly in the party and the advocacy community. One thing I will say, though, is that the American public is already there. The American public is way ahead of us. They are hungry for new actions. They are ready for boycotts. They are ready for work stoppages. They're ready to take on these new tactics. We actually just need to be there to catch that energy and channel it.
Yeah, and then also you need the right moments as well, like a Kimmel moment where
Right
there's
moments.
something that is so
Exactly.
big and gets so much attention, and that there's an easy onboarding for people to engage with that, whatever it is.
Right now, you're seeing that moment as well through Snap.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's not a boycott moment, but it is a mass mutual aid moment. And you are watching Americans. I will say the past week, as horrifying as some of these things are, really seeing the humanity in Americans has given me a lot of hope, right? Just people going on social media and being like, hey, can I have a grocery buddy? Does anyone need me to buy them groceries? You know, the food banks, all of the mutual aid efforts, the small businesses across this country that are stepping up and saying, we're going to provide free food and fundraising to provide free meals for people. Like, this is what it looked like for Americans to take care of each other, and also what we're capable of, right? When the government fails, people step up and we take care of each other. And that is also collective power. That is also collective action. And so I find that to be really beautiful in this.
It is encouraging because so much of our current politics are driven by cruelty and hate and distrust. And so it is a relief in a moment to see a huge number of people showing care and compassion and concern for others. Emotions and triggering emotions are a really important part of driving a narrative. And one of the things I've been wondering about is, and a lot of people have talked about, we shouldn't be talking about like restoring the democracy or the system we had. A, it's gone, and B, it wasn't working all that well anyway, which is part of why we're where we are now, because a lot of people did feel disenfranchised, left behind, left out. And so part of all of this is we have to also be able to articulate a vision of what's next, or what do we want? And what do you think that looks like? And what are the emotions that help propel that vision?
I think you're absolutely right that we need a positive vision. I think the left has been talking about the need for a positive vision for a long time and has not successfully articulated it. But we are seeing today, on election day, actually how galvanizing that can be when we look at New York and Mamdani. He is running a campaign that is about two things that are really important. One is about change, which Americans want radical change. I feel like there has been a conversation about incrementalism for a long time. And Americans know that the status quo has not been working, has been screwing them over, and they want something different. And that is something that is consistent in their voting behavior. That is a lot of why people voted for Trump.
Yeah.
Yes, you have people that wanted to be more racist and all that stuff, but there are a lot of people that just voted for like, maybe this will be the big change that will actually make things better for me in this country. And we're seeing that with Mamdani. And actually, there was a Politico poll that came out like a couple of days ago where it was like 52% of people say that they want radical change in America overall. And that's across demographics. Versus only 32% say we only need small changes. People want big change. So Mamdani is running on I am taking on the oligarchs. I am taking on the billionaires. We are doing big change. And he is running on a positive vision for how life will be better for you. And those are two lessons that we can learn as we think about what a positive agenda might be, is not running on, like you said, the return to a past that didn't work for a lot of people. And we actually have the freedom to dream, to innovate. What is the America that we always wish we had, but we never have been able to have? And that's the America that we're fighting for. We're not fighting for restoring, saving, defending, all of these backwards sounding words. We are reconstructing, we are rebuilding, we are dreaming, we are innovating. Those are the types of visioning that we need to be doing. And I think that will galvanize people more. The more that you say that you're going to go back to something, the less people are going to get excited.
In my most optimistic moments, which are few, I look at this time. I mean, it's a pain in the ass, right? It's a pain in the ass to have to deal with your country turning it into an authoritarian state, a terrible person like Donald Trump wielding extraordinary power, whether or not he's supposed to have it or not. But another way to look at it is we have the privilege of being here to resist and to change the course at a time when the country really, really needs it. And we are in a position where we can actually shape, what is the next version of the United States? What will it look like? And as depressing as all of this gets, the fact that we're in this moment that I think it's we're in one of the most significant political upheavals, transitions in U.S. history. This is a 40-year thing. This has been brewing for a long time, and it's not just going to go away just when Trump leaves. Because there is that built-in 25 to 33% of Americans who seem to really like this.
That is a little bit the silver lining. Because I think what you said, I don't know if it's a silver lining, but I think what you said is this didn't happen overnight with Trump, right? It's been brewing. Decades of neoliberal policies have created this class inequity where, a few people are hoarding all of the world wealth while Americans are suffering just to make ends meet. That has been going on and has been escalating for decades now. And so we've just reached this sort of inflection point, and the system needs to radically change. We cannot continue having billionaires while people go hungry in the richest country in the history of the world, right? That is not okay. And we are at a moment where we collectively can change that. And so this is an opportunity, like you're saying. This is something that has been screwing Americans over for decades. And we have a catalyzing moment where we can rise up together and we can demand the America that we want.
So you talked about attention, content, virality, drive, persuasion, and not that we have to go too far down the rabbit hole of why is the right so effective at this and why is it so difficult for the left to adapt? And, I'm not sure if sometimes knowing the why of something is really important to being able to unravel it. And sometimes it's just, we just need to change course. But I think one of the most essential steps for the left is we've got to catch up our ability to communicate effectively with large groups of people. And so far, we haven't been doing great. I'm just curious if you've got thoughts on why that is and what progressives can learn from the right and how we can do better without copying manipulative tactics. And I have another aspect of this question in here, which is also, given how the algorithms are written, we can channel anger as well, but also the algorithms really are keyed onto outrage, which I guess we can channel too. But there's so many more negative emotions that the right seems to really revel in that drive those things. I sometimes wonder, can we even get up to parity, even if we do all those sort of the right things, just given how the algorithms work and how they're tuned? Not to mention the fact that some of them are under the control of people who have decided to align themselves with the authoritarianism. So they may just keep changing them so that we can't. But anyway, lots of questions wrapped up in a big ball. Sorry about that.
A lot there. A couple of immediate thoughts, though. So I think there's a few pieces of this. One, there's the algorithm, but there's also infrastructure. The right has invested in decades in building their own media empire, which we have only started scratching the surface at, right? They have their own news networks, they have their own personalities, they have podcasts, they have all of these things that they've been building for a long, long, long time. And so they've created the echo chamber. They have Fox News, they have Breitbart, they have OAN, they have Tucker Carlson. They have, you could name many, 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 many pieces of media infrastructure that they own and control. We have only in the past 5 years started creating our own media companies, building personalities. Everybody has seen that Media Matters chart with the bubbles where you can just see that the right wing media ecosystem is much larger than ours. So that is, we're fighting from behind. And so the more that we can actually build that infrastructure, that's a very, very important investment that we need to be making. And then there is the actual things that we are putting out. And that's where the pollingism is the death of us, where we are not putting out things that are actually going to move on the internet. We just aren't. We are putting out poll-tested messages that resonate with no one in the real world, but create a lot of agreement in the survey. It's just about the content, and it's about also authenticity, right? Do we have good messengers that can speak authentically to people that have audience, that have reach? And then are we promoting ideas that go viral organically? And we can use social listening to look at what are the things that continue to trend. And there are a few things that I've seen consistently in the past 6 months. ICE abductions, we've already talked about, continue to go viral. Ordinary citizens actually being defiant and pushing back go viral. The sandwich guy in New York, the polka dot dressed lady flicking off ICE in New York, the Portland frog, right? People in Chicago with their whistles protecting their neighbors. Any of that footage continues to go viral because it shows that like power. It's like people have power, and it's really uplifting and it's really joyful and it's like kind of fun and humorous, and mockery is always good in a moment of doom and gloom. Two other things that continue to go viral: anything related to Gaza and Epstein. These are kind of the 4 buckets of things that I've seen consistently go viral. And if you look at those things, because they're all sort of emotional topics, right? They are topics that make people feel things, right? When you see children in Gaza starving, unless you have no soul, it's impossible for you to not feel a thing. And with the Epstein thing, that speaks to this really deeply held belief that people have that the system is rigged and is serving an elite few, which it is. And the entire Epstein conversation speaks directly to that. And that's also something that we are not talking about enough, because we're, again, focusing too much the conversation on like the left or the right and where you are on the political spectrum, when really we should be thinking about working people versus the billionaire Epstein class that is stealing from us. They are pedophiles. They are like everything wrong. Everything is wrong because of them. And so that's where we need to channel our anger instead of like left versus right. And I think we get stuck in that conversation too much, because you'll actually find that people who voted for Trump agree with us on this stuff. The idea that the wealthy have too much and that we're being screwed over.
Yeah. Well, and they somehow thought Trump was going to do something about that.
Even he was able to project this idea of change, right? This idea that he was going to do something different. And Kamala saying she's going to do nothing different than Joe Biden was probably the biggest mistake of her campaign. One of the biggest mistakes of her campaign.
Well, he certainly has done things different. What do you make of the reaction to him trying to get $230 million out of the Department of Justice? That, to me, felt pretty visceral, because I was thinking, wait, so how many of my tax dollars are going to go straight into Donald Trump's pocket because he violated the law in such overt and terrible ways that he had to be investigated and should have been prosecuted? But at any rate, why do we have to pay for that? Like, is that pissing people off? Is it breaking through?
I think there was actually a cluster of things in that same week where, when you put it all together, pissed people off. So you have the DOJ payment. You have the Argentina bailout. That one actually really pissed people off, because I think there's a general sense of our taxpayer dollars going elsewhere. And I think there's a lot of backlash to Israel and Ukraine around that. But now you're bailing out Argentina, and then you're also building the ballroom, and you're throwing the Gatsby-themed party that I just mentioned. All of that has happened in the last week. And when you package it all up together, Christine also bought some luxury private jets. You're extorting the DOJ for our taxpayer dollars, and you're bailing out Argentina. Meanwhile, everyone's health insurance premiums are about to skyrocket, and 42 million Americans are about to go hungry. Like, fuck this. I mean, like, if you hear all of that and you don't feel an innate sense of fuck this, then I don't know. You probably do feel that.
You've called coalitions messy, beautiful, living, breathing things. How do you make big collaborative efforts succeed? What should people who are in the advocacy community, whether it's reproductive rights or environment or criminal justice or whatever, how do we form this coalition, or how do we make that more effective and work better, given the fact they are messy things?
They're messy things. As anyone who's done coalitional work knows, it gets messy. One of the things I think is most important is everybody feels and knows that they have a part to play and that no one is expected to carry the whole, right? So you need some kind of framework to understand what is my part in this. And I think as we're thinking about how we free America from fascism, I think about it in sort of three planks. One is we have to slow it down, right? That's kind of where we are right now. We're in the slow it down phase. That means we have to defy the regime. We have to disincentivize capitulation the way that we did with Disney. We have to incentivize defections from their side. So when we can be amplifying things like the National Guard soldiers in Illinois saying they're going to disobey orders, the military commander from the South who stepped down because he didn't want to bomb boats in the Caribbean, right? Anytime there's defections, we want to be celebrating those. We also need to fight for our communities. We need to fight back against the regressive policies. We need to fight to make sure we have free and fair elections because that's something they're trying to also destroy. And then we also have to grow our movement, right? This is what we need to be doing right now. And everybody has a role in that. Some people might be like, I'm an elections group and I'm focused on fighting for free and fair elections. There might be like an organizing group that's like, I'm going to work on figuring out clear corporate boycotts that we can be using to disincentivize capitulation. Everybody has a role to play to slow it down. Then we have to actually stop the consolidation of authoritarianism. And since we are in competitive authoritarianism, where we still have elections, our elections are a way to do that. And the midterms are our first chance to stop the consolidation. And so we have to actually win those things, right? We got to win those elections. We have to make sure they're fair so that we can win them. But it's not enough to just win them. We have to be able to, one, prove that we won them. And we have to be able to enforce the outcome. And this is something that's really, really important that we hear from anti-authoritarian experts and researchers, which is if you cannot enforce the outcome through some mass movement, if you can't have millions and millions of Americans say, we're going to shut this country down unless you listen to the will of people, then how are you going to ensure that the election results stick? And so we have to work backwards from there and think, okay, 1 year from now, we need to be able to create a mass disruption to enforce the outcome of the election. Then what do we need to do between now and then? And everybody has a role to play in the coalition to do that, whether that is organizing people, whether that is protecting their communities from ICE, whether it is advocating at the state level for policies that protect elections. Like there's no shortage of work to do here. It is messy because there is so much to do and there are so many people, but we need everyone. And I think one of the most important pieces of making a coalition work is knowing here's what we have to accomplish together, and everybody just take their part of it and run, and we will get there.
The Trump regime has a lot of levers it can pull to try to interfere. I mean, they've already started with sending in election monitors and wanting all of the voter rolls from a bunch of states. Well, and it's not just the Trump regime, but depending on what the Supreme Court does with the Voting Rights Act, there could be a whole lot of Democratic districts vanish, particularly in the Southeast. And then, I was thinking about ICE and the National Guard. You know, you'd have to run a gauntlet of them to get to your voting place in the interest of security. Should we just assume Trump is going to throw every single lever he possibly can to make sure that the Republican Party holds on to power after the election?
Yes, we should assume that. He's going to. I mean, if anything, we have no evidence to think otherwise. He's going to do everything he can to try to rig the election, which is why we need to do everything we can to say, fuck no. And that's why working backwards from this end goal of like, we need to be able to win and enforce the election result. And that means a credible threat of mass societal disruption. Like we have to make the cost of them trying to rig the midterms much larger than the cost of them taking them, stealing them. And that means we have to really, really organize for the next year because you need key pillars of society to defect from Trump to support the will of the people. And that happened in 2020, right? He tried to contest the election and the business community defected, this military, like there was a lot of, and faith leaders and civil society, there's a lot of pillars of society that allow authoritarianism to thrive. And so our job is to make it so that our power is so strong that they are afraid of us more than they are afraid of the regime. And that's going to take a lot of work. We are not there right now. Like, we couldn't suddenly get 20 million people to shut down the country tomorrow. No, but we have a year to figure out how to organize and make that happen. And that is sort of the orientation that I've been working in terms of like, what is our task for the next year? And I think having that as a clear end goal provides a lot of clarity in what we need to do. We're not going to do that tomorrow. We need to practice. We have to practice what mass disruption looks like. Over the next year, we have lots of opportunities to do that. And we need to take every single one to grow our movement, to socialize this idea. Because we should assume that that is what they will try to do, that they will try to interfere and rig the election. And we just have to stop them. We have no other option. What else are we going to do?
That's pretty much what there is to do. So what is a piece of advice that you got from a mentor or someone you respect, or a lesson that you learned over the years that has been really valuable to you and that you would like to share with others?
So one lesson I think I've learned maybe more recently, so it's not one that I've learned early on, but I think it's served me well in the current moment too, is you can't wait for other people to do what you think needs to be done. You just have to start doing it, right? There is this feeling of like, who's the leader? I would say the left has a real vacuum of leadership in general. And I think everyone should just look in the mirror and say, we are the leaders that we've been waiting for. Like, we all just have to do something. Doesn't have to be everything. Not everyone has to do everything, but we just have to do something, especially when things feel dark and it feels unclear and we don't know which way is up and which way is down. We just have to pick something and start doing it. And if it's the right thing, people will come along.
Yeah, I think that's great. The leaders are the ones who just start leading. Jiggy, thank you so much. I really appreciate this. Has been a lot of fun, as depressing as it is, but I also feel a lot of optimism from having spoken with you, and I feel energized, and I think listeners will too. And I really appreciate your time.
I think things are depressing, but I have a lot of optimism, probably more than most people, because I spend all my days looking for the ways that people are resisting, and I just see Americans rising up. And I know that the task we have ahead of us is huge, but other people have done this before. Like, people have toppled fascist governments in other places. We are not the first ones to face this. They have a playbook. We have a playbook. We just have to do it. We just have to do it. And that's knowing that that's just what we have to do, I think, is really clarifying and gives me a sense of direction and hope. So we're in it together. We'll get out of this mess, but we just have to do it.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning into The Campaign Strategist, where we dive into the art and science of advocacy. The podcast is produced by Prismatic Strategies to share wisdom and insights from leaders in the field. I'm your host, Pete Altman. Music was written by Andrea Perry and Pete Altman, and this is edited by Abby Altman. If you enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with others who care about making a difference. You can find us wherever you get your podcast. Thanks again, and see you next time.